What's going on, guys? Welcome back to You Know Ball Podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, I apologize for my saw-looking basement, but I don't have anywhere else to record right now, so please forgive me. I just wanted to get some thoughts off, rant a little bit about what happened last night in the Sixers-Pistons game. Majority of this episode was focused on Doc Rivers and the team's recent struggles, although I was kind of encouraged coming out of the Suns and Bucks games that they competed in those games. Things have felt a little bit off. There definitely feels like there's a little bit of tension between Embiid and Doc and the team in general. The vibes are a little bit off from where they were before, especially when James Harden first got here and things seemed to be going great. The honeymoon definitely seems to be over, and that culminated last night with Doc Rivers' comments after the game when he basically said, he wasn't mad at the bench for not scoring because James Harden was doing a bunch of ISO ball while they were playing with him. And to be fair, last night, if James Harden plays like that, the Sixers roster is not configured to overcome a bad James Harden game like that. Harden, every other game, it seems like, just cannot hit a shot, cannot get by anyone, struggles, especially on switches, and things have been a little bit up and down for him. I'm hoping it's the hamstring because in some games he can hit his shots. He can look like in the Bucks game, I felt like he was able to get by some defenders sometimes. He wasn't being guarded by Giannis and Drew the whole time, but he got by Middleton a few times, got by Wes Matthews pretty easily. I felt like things were looking up. And then it comes crashing back down with the Pistons game last night. And overall, I feel like last night you can kind of put on the bad Harden game and the fact that Doc still plays DeAndre Jordan, despite the fact that he is not an NBA player. He is not an NBA player anymore. I mean, he was -9 in 10 minutes again. Like, the guy just should, other than the Suns game, DeAndre Jordan has not shown life on the Sixers in any stretch, pretty much, the entire season, basically. Maybe the one game against the Cavs when he was standing in the dunker spot and just catching lobs. Defensively, he's cooked. Offensively, he brings nothing to the table. And ultimately, if James Harden plays the way that he plays, the Sixers aren't going anywhere. So I can't get too mad at Doc about that. But at the same time, you're the coach, and Daryl Morey, you're the GM who gave him this guy to play, and you knew he was going to play him, and he's terrible. The Sixers are constantly on the verge of pulling away against teams, whether it's good teams, it's bad teams. And then the bench comes in and they never extend a lead. And the one game that they did was the Suns game when James Harden struggled. So it seems like they can't really get on the same page of just putting their foot down and just putting their foot on the gas and blowing a team out. Like, it's not really in the cards for this team. There's always something that seems to be off. And last night, and even though his comments might have been taken out of context, like, this is the same thing that we've heard with Doc, especially a few days after Embiid criticizes him, which I talked about on this episode. Doc has got to go. Like, I've been not a Doc guy since the jump, and the playoffs kind of proved to me why, but like, I was willing to give him another year because of the fact that, you had the Ben Simmons collapse. Everyone struggled in that Hawks series at different points. Even Joel Embiid did. And I was willing to give Doc a second year, a second chance to prove that he can learn and change. And it's never going to happen. We talked about it on this episode. You can feel the wheels starting to come off on the Doc Rivers Sixers. And it all starts with the star of the team calling him out, and then him making kind of side-eyed comments at the other star on the team. And especially with a guy like James Harden, who has a history of blowing up locker rooms, who has a history of leaving his team, who has a history of just being like, fuck this, I'm out of here. He's a free agent after the season. And even if you weren't a fan of the James Harden trade, even if you didn't want the Sixers to get James Harden, he's on the Sixers now. And if you lose him, you're completely fucked. And Doc Rivers making those comments, even if he didn't mean it in that way, you have to be extremely careful. And I know that Daryl Morey is the number one James Harden guy. And I know that he's not the biggest Doc Rivers fan, despite what everyone fucking says. I think that there's definitely some tension between those two as well. And I think that if the Sixers do flame out in the playoffs, which it's looking increasingly likely, this is probably karma for me doing the Heat Pack episode last week where I just made fun of the Heat, and now they're back in first place and we fell to fourth, and here we are, right? But if the team continues to skid down the end of the season and just completely go off the rails and then lose in the first or second round of the playoffs in embarrassing fashion, Doc Rivers will be gone, because I think that that would be the first time that Daryl Morey feels real pressure on him following the Harden trade. Embiid's in his prime. You need to kind of try to win right fucking now. And this does feel like the beginning of the end for Doc. The only way that I can the only way I think that he can overcome this is if the Sixers make a run to the conference finals or the finals, which looks increasingly unlikely, despite the fact that I do feel overall fine about the team. I think that Daryl Morey not going all in with this roster because he was so focused on the Harden trade and not being able to get an adequate backup center and any wing depth at all will probably be the downfall of this team. In addition to that, Doc Rivers just being Doc Rivers, James Harden not looking healthy and possibly washed. There's a lot of question marks with this team, but I think that I'm once again trying to remain positive. It's now April, but that game was the last day of March. The Pistons have been playing their fucking asses off recently, and there have been a lot of parallels to the 18-19 Sixers recently, which is the vibes are a little bit weird. They're not really getting along, and down the stretch of the season, they're competing against teams like the Bucks. Like, they beat the Bucks once, they lost to the Bucks once. Sound familiar? They are competing against these teams that are teams that they're supposed to get up for, but then they lost 2 games to the Atlanta Hawks that season, who, by the way, that was Trey's rookie season. That was end of the year. They lost 2 games to Trey and the Hawks. Embiid didn't play in some of those games, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But I still think that the Sixers will be better come playoff time, but it ultimately comes down to 2 things. It comes down to, is James Harden, or is he a shell of his former self? And then on top of that, is the bench and the backup center situation tenable and fixable? And I don't know the answers to that right now. So we'll see over the next few weeks whether the team can overcome all of this recent drama. We'll see if they can make a run. I do think that their best chance at making a run is probably in the 4 seed, and it's something that I talked about before. But I also don't think that you should have a bunch of losses right before the playoffs, not having a ton of confidence heading into the playoffs. Right now, they would face Chicago in the first round. By the way, they have a chance to slip even further. Like, they play Toronto next week in Toronto, and it's a possibility they could fall to 5 or 6. I don't think it's going to happen, because I think that the rest of the schedule should be easy enough that they can overcome that, because they play the Pacers twice and they play the Pistons once more. But, like, we just saw them against a bad team last night, and how did it look? And it feels as though staying in the 4 seed is their best option, especially if Miami holds on to the 1 seed. Because then you have, probably in the first round, you have Chicago, who the Sixers have owned for years and will probably beat in a 7-game series. And then you have Miami, who is undeniably the best second round matchup. The Sixers are a bad matchup with the Celtics and Nets, as I've brought up before. I think the Bucks are probably just better when they actually care. They'll probably beat the Sixers in a 7-game series. I think it will be closer than people might think, but I think that ultimately they would win that series. And I think that right now the Sixers' best path is that. But you've seen Miami come out and, even when they have had their weird vibes and stuff, they've played well against the Sixers this year. They've really fucked up their half-court offense, and that's kind of what needs to carry the Sixers in the playoffs. So the Sixers have no guaranteed route to a conference finals or a finals, is what I'm trying to say here. And ultimately, this might come down to Joel Embiid just going into sicko mode and carrying the Sixers for 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll see if he is that tier of player. Because Joel, as great as he is, has had some burnouts in the playoffs, health-wise, fatigue-wise, and I hope that he takes this personally, and I hope that him maybe getting burnt on this MVP for some bullshit at the end of the season and possibly first-team All-NBA motivates him to kind of carry the team and be the leader that we know that he can be. So that's my rant. We're going on 10 minutes here. all the other stuff. You can catch in the description. I will have the merch. You can buy merch. I'm releasing more merch soon, but the first round of merch is all great, and please support me and Dewani with that. I have some other people that I'm working on for the second round of merch that I will be releasing soon, right before the playoffs. I have the Square that you could donate to. We just got our first donation in like a month on there, so you can support us through there. You can rate us on Apple. You can rate us on Spotify. You can rate us on any podcast platform that allows that. And you can also like us on YouTube. Please like this video. Subscribe if you can. If you enjoy my content, please share it with people. I would really appreciate that. I'm about to hit 10,000 followers on Twitter. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I'm trying to take this thing to the next level. So thank you for being here with me and supporting me. And I will talk to you soon, hopefully with some better news next week about the Sixers, even though things never really seem to be that way, huh? Peace. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and joining me once again for the fourth time on the Ball podcast, got my buddy Rob Flom, aka Rich Homie Flom from 213 Hoops. What's going on, Rob?
Not much. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. We get to talk about something that we have in common. Last time you were on the podcast, we mentioned it. We did an episode about a year ago where we actually went pretty in depth on Doc Rivers and his playoff struggles and his time with the Clippers, the team that you cover, and now he is the Sixers head coach. And I really feel like I'm losing my mind with this guy. I don't know how else to put it other than the fact that I don't want to put all of the blame on him, but it does feel like that classic Doc situation where the wheels are kind of starting to come off a little bit because the Sixers have, by all standards, exceeded expectations when you consider the circumstances this year. And I do think Doc needs a little bit of credit, especially when Embiid doesn't play. They've been competitive in most of those games. I think that, as you have mentioned to me before, Doc is really good when he doesn't have star players. He's great when he doesn't have the pressure of winning on him. And I have to give him credit for that. But more recently, especially with Joel Embiid's post-game comments after the Bucks loss, it does feel like we're headed down the path that Doc always heads down. And you know it very well.
Yeah, it's so weird. I think we did talk about this in that pod, but the Doc got this reputation as like a star players coach because of his time in Boston. That's like where he's at his absolute worst. When he needs to like stagger, and like he never staggered the Clippers ever. It drove Clippers fans absolutely insane. We had articles like every year, like here's easy ways that Doc could stagger these guys. You pair, Chris and Blake. You don't even need to stagger anybody else. Just they don't play that great together. You stagger them. They each get to run their own teams in their own ways, and 10 minutes a game, however much it is. Never did it. But yeah, like he's great when Embiid isn't playing, and it's like Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey, and they're just winning games. And it makes no sense. And then Embiid plays, and like he plays Paul Millsap for too long, and somehow DeAndre Jordan is still in the NBA, and it is bad. I will say that it's so hard to know the politics behind player signings, but I blame Daryl Morey for the DeAndre Jordan situation.
I think you 100% are fair in saying that.
Yeah, like Doc loves DeAndre. DeAndre might be Doc's all-time favorite player. He's really up there. It might be like Paul Pierce, but DeAndre is like a top 3, top 5 all-time Doc guy. Like he was not a great player when Doc came to the Clippers, and Doc was like, I believe in you. You can be a star. You're going to be the guy. And DeAndre was great. Like he was legitimately great for the Clippers for like 5 years. And he credits that to Doc. And like, that is one of Doc's biggest successes. And it's like, you give that guy to Doc and Doc is going to play him. Like, of course it's going to happen.
Yeah. As your job as a GM, president of basketball operations, whatever more he is to make sure that your coach is given the guys that and if you give him one of his guys, especially a coach like Doc, I think a lot of coaches fall for the veteran thing far too often. I think that even good coaches can fall for the veteran thing. Yeah. But at a certain point, they realize that it's untenable. And Doc will never reach that point if you give him the guys to play. Like, if we had just not signed DeAndre Jordan or even Willie Cauley-Stein and we just rolled with Millsap, Bassey, and Reed into the playoffs, there's no way we would be in a worse situation than we are right now.
Mhm.
And I think it stings Sixers fans specifically because we've seen it before in the playoffs in those minutes. And it's something that when I was losing my mind when we signed DeAndre Jordan, I was like, this is horrible. What are you doing? And I feel like I've been justified a little bit. Now,
Yeah.
he actually had some decent minutes in the Suns game for probably the first time as a Sixer. And then immediately the next game, Doc decides this is the Paul Millsap game. And like Embiid's comments after the game where he basically said, and to be fair, Embiid does need to be better with this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Because as
Yeah.
people have pointed out, like Giannis isn't doing this, Steph isn't doing this, Jokic isn't doing this. LeBron's doing this, but LeBron's LeBron, and like he can get away with it. But like Durant doesn't do this. The majority of superstars, you can call out your coach and you can be frustrated with players on the team and all that stuff. But ultimately, you know, we had a chance to win at the end. Giannis blocked you at the rim, and you can't put everything on the coaching and Doc, even though, of course, we won in your minutes, but it was a pretty tight margin. Like, he was a +3 in a 2-point game. Like, that could be the difference of one play or not. But my whole point on this is that we're starting to see, like, Doc is never going to change. Like, it's almost to the point where it feels like he's fucking with us. Because after the game, he goes out to the press and says, you know, I almost played Paul Reed, but he struggled last time when we played against Milwaukee. He didn't even play the last time we played against Milwaukee. And on top of that, his best game of the season was the first game of the season against Milwaukee when he held Giannis to 4 for 11 from the field. Giannis goes and he scores 12 points in like 2 minutes on Paul Millsap.
It was tough.
We blow the game. Like, it just feels like part of it is on Morey for sure for giving him these players, and I totally agree with that. But another part of it is like, you have to be flexible as a coach, dude. You just have to be flexible, and he just never will be.
Yeah, it's at this point in his career, I mean, he's been coaching for what, like, 20 something years. He started with Orlando in 1999. He's been coaching almost every single year since then. Maybe every single year. I don't know if
I
he's
think he has.
ever
I think the
had.
only time he did the TV studio stuff when the Celtics and the Clippers lost early in the playoffs. I don't think he ever took a year off.
I don't think so. I'm looking at his coaching record here, and I mean, he was fired by the Magic in early 2004, but he started coaching the next season. So the rest of that season, he was not hired. But that is it. So he's been coaching continuously for like 23 years, and yeah, like I don't think he's shown much adaptation. Like, he's not a guy who will be flexible. He is like some of the stuff with young players is really interesting because when he was given really talented young guys, he did play them. Like, he's played Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah.
Like, you have to.
He
I
was
think
kind of
Tyrese
forced
Maxey's.
into that, though, because of the Ben Simmons situation. Like,
Yeah.
he was forced to play him big minutes, I should say. Like,
Yes.
Maxey would be the sixth man if Ben played this year and probably played 20 minutes a game, 25 minutes a game.
Yeah. Like, when he's forced to, he will. Like, I mean, he doesn't have much of a choice, but like he will do that. When the Clippers in his last second to last year when they had Shea as a rookie, he played Shea a ton. I mean, the Clippers did have to trade Avery Bradley to get his
Right.
carcass off the team. Uh, Maybe my least favorite Clipper of all time.
We're sensing a theme here, though. The front office was like, we got to get rid of this fucking guy, so he plays Shea.
Yes.
So that Shea, even if Shea isn't good enough to help us win right now, which he was, by the way, he was really good as a rookie.
Yeah, he was super good.
Even if he wasn't, we need to get this guy's trade value up because we're trying to get a second star when we get Kawhi Leonard or develop him into a second star. Like the disconnect is just obvious, and it seems like Morey needs to take things into his own hands. Like, I literally tweeted during the game the other day, he should just cut Paul Millsap and DeAndre Jordan. They're so terrible.
It is tough. I mean, and this is where we just don't know the team dynamics well enough. And like, maybe people who are like super plugged in with the team might know a little bit about this, but like, you just never know who are guys on the team who seem useless, maybe are useless on the court, and are just like, they're so beloved in the locker room or just have the team dynamics. The thing with DJ is he's only been there for like, 3 weeks. Like, I mean, he is a really widely respected veteran. Everybody loves DJ. It's why he's still in the NBA. But like, he hasn't been there long enough that I feel like you can't cut him. Whether Morey will, I doubt. It
He won't.
probably is the smart play. Um, Millsap is more interesting because he is kind of a Doc guy in that he's just been around for forever, and like Doc coached against him, and Doc has, for like 17 years or however long Millsap's been in the NBA. But I don't think he's like a Doc guy like that. I think you probably could get away with cutting Millsap, but again, I don't think he will.
I just think it's a bad look to cut a guy
Yes.
this late into the season because,
Yes.
like, you guys just had to make the tough decision to cut Semi Ojeleye, who's not good, but
Brutal.
he's bad. But he is a guy who's been in the league for a few years, and on top of that, now that you guys release him at this time of the year, he can't even sign with another team for the playoffs. And like, not that Semi Ojeleye would be cracking playoff rotations, but a lot of the times this late into the year, especially a guy with Morey who has a pretty bad player rep already, is not going to just be like, oh, we'll cut these veteran guys who are well respected, way more so than Semi Ojeleye. Paul
Oh, yeah.
Millsap and DeAndre Jordan have actually had great NBA careers. And you don't want to upset any agents, and you don't want to upset any players and say, why did they do that? Like, he can't even go sign with a team that's going to make a playoff run now. Like, so I get it from that perspective, but you didn't have to acquire these guys in the first place is my big problem with that, because you had the choice and you chose to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like, it is a lot on Morey. I mean, it's more on Doc because he is the actual coach and he can just not play these guys. But yeah, like, I mean, Morey should have known better, and who knows what pressure was on him for DJ. Like, it seemed like that's the guy he actually wanted. Harden did, of course, play with him in Brooklyn for a little bit and must have also recommended him and signed off on him. But it was a very confusing signing. I mean, I didn't like the Willie Cauley-Stein signing either, but like, he's much better than DeAndre Jordan. He's much better than Paul Millsap. Like, you could have just kept him. I mean, I don't think he's a guy you want to play. Does he
I
solve their
think he's
issues?
just
Not really.
I
But
think he's just physically cooked. Like, I think that
yeah,
he had an injury or something. He just,
okay.
like, apparently did not look good at all this year, which, once again, what's the difference?
Yeah,
Like, what's
yeah.
DeAndre Jordan and Millsap are also experiencing the same thing. They can't jump off of the ground.
Yeah, it's brutal. It is brutal. Like DeAndre, it's so funny because his rebounding numbers still look really good a lot of the time. And it's like, but he just moves. It's like, how is he getting these? It's just because
Yep.
he's massive. He's just
Yeah.
super tall. And he does know positioning, like he is in the right place, but like he cannot move at all
Right.
anywhere. It's really bad.
And my thing with Reed and Bassey is, like, I'm not even a big Paul Reed guy. Like, I think that Paul Reed is one of those guys that would probably flourish in a situation like Oklahoma City, team that's like kind of bad, where he can just like learn from his mistakes and
Yep.
develop
Yep.
into a player. Like, I think that that's kind of an ideal situation for him. I think Bassey's probably more of a plug and play backup center, will do those kind of things, but both of them are going to do the things that DeAndre Jordan and Paul Millsap can do, which is they're both going to rebound. They're both going to, if you play them at the 5, Paul Reed should know where to be positionally, like as a defender. He's a little bit all over the place when you try to play him with another center. He's kind of just not a super high basketball IQ, but they will give you energy off the bench that you are
Yes.
seeking from these other guys. And my whole thing has been like, I don't care if they suck. I just want to see them suck. Like, I want to see them go out there and like have the opportunity to be just as bad as the veterans. And once we got James Harden, we never got to see that at all. Like, we have not seen those two. We haven't seen Reed with Harden at the 5 at all, not
Yep.
one game. And then we haven't seen Bassey play literally at all except for garbage time. So
Yeah.
it's really just like we are stuck with the options that we currently have. And we know that it can swing a playoff game and a series because of, the non-Embiid minutes, especially when James Harden isn't 100% healthy and can't carry like he used to be able to.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me so much of some of the early, actually it's technically the early Doc Clippers years when they had these late first round picks and just never played. Reggie Bullock was a guy. He's the only one of them who actually turned out to be good. But he never played for the Clippers. He got every once in a while he'd get a rotation minute when, JJ Redick was out or Chris Paul was out or whatever. I mean, he didn't look very good. I don't know if anybody really would have thought like this is a guy who's going to have a 10-year career and make like $80 million or whatever across multiple contracts. But like They didn't know. They never knew. And same with CJ Wilcox, who unfortunately had like 3 ACL tears and just never got his career off the ground. Like Bryce Johnson, who is actually just playing in like a second tier Korean league or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Better than Ben Simmons,
oh
though.
yeah,
Michael
hilarious.
Wilbon.
But yeah, like they just never played. They never ever played. And fans were always like, we don't know. And that's where the tricky part comes in. It's like these guys do get seen in practice. And like from Bryce Johnson was just like not good. They're like, this guy is just not good.
Yeah.
And he was a first round pick and they declined like not his second year option, but his third year option like right away. And I think they traded him as a throw into some deal. Like they barely even invested in him. As soon as they saw him play extensively, they're like, this guy isn't good.
Yeah.
And we don't know if that's the case with Bassey and Reed. I would guess not, because they have played more than like Bryce did or Diamond Stone, or name a random Clipper from that era.
Dude, okay. I just to interrupt you, sorry, but like we saw Bassey play good defense on Jokic earlier this year. I saw that with my eyes. I was losing my mind during our live podcast when we did this. I saw Paul Reed play good defense on Giannis. Like, I'm not saying these guys are even fucking good. I'm just saying I've seen them have moments, stretches, games that show me that they at least should have a shot at an NBA rotation. And there's nothing that Paul Millsap and DeAndre Jordan, except for maybe slight moments, have shown me that they should be playing over them.
Yeah, I mean, there's zero upside with those guys. There is some upside with Reed and Bassey. You never know. Like one of those guys, something could click. Like, I mean, neither of them is nearly as good as Tyrese Maxey, obviously. But like Maxey had that game against the Hawks where it was like he saved the Sixers, and like he didn't have an amazing rookie year. Like he was good.
Yeah,
he showed a lot of promise. But like nobody thought he'd be like this year. No. And it's like, you never know. Like if you play Paul Reed, maybe he has like a 7 rebound in 3-minute stretch where he just gobbles up rebounds, does some random stuff defensively, or Bassey throws down like 2 dunks. Like these are guys who can, like DJ and Millsap, they're cooked. They're absolutely cooked. They have no upside. They're not going to do anything. It's really bad.
Yep. And we've seen it now. I mean, I said it when we got them and I knew that this would happen. I was willing to give Paul Millsap at least a little bit of a shot because at least Paul Millsap was in a playoff rotation like 2 years ago. Like, DeAndre Jordan hasn't been good or in a playoff rotation in 5 years. Like when was the last time you were like, oh, DeAndre Jordan just had a really good game? Like I knew that from the jump, this wasn't going to work. And this is something that I've been trying to like, hopefully avoid, because I've been a little bit more positive about the team overall recently. Coming out of the Suns and the Bucks game, like I actually don't feel bad about the team overall. Like it's really just Doc and the backup center thing that I don't think are solvable. Like I think that both of them are going to be the weaknesses of this team and could be the downfall of this team. But I think that like everyone had this doomer mindset, whereas like Mike Chiotto pointed out to me and like has said it multiple times, like if Harden hits that step back or Joel puts that bucket in and we go to overtime or we win the game in regulation, like the narrative is we're contenders. And because that shot doesn't go in, it's, oh, the Sixers choked away another game. Oh, like, they're not real contenders. And I'm like, I don't know. Like they just went up against the Suns, who were the best team in the NBA this season and played really well. The only thing about the Bucks is that the Bucks don't really give a shit for the first 3.5 quarters of a game, and then they turn it on in the fourth. Like they're a weird team because they're not dominant in like a Warriors, like what we're used to in terms of like really good teams. Like they're kind of just like they don't fuck up down the stretch. They play really hard defense, and when they care, they will probably beat you. And it is one of those things where I think that the Sixers should feel pretty good about the fact that like the only thing that sucks is like, I think they're 10-5 now with Harden, and like 4 of their losses are against really good teams. And then like, they only have like 2 like good wins. But also once again, all of those games came down to the end, except for the Nets game. So you would hope that like they can take some positives from these games and head into the playoffs with like, we can compete with anyone mindset, instead of like, the wheels are falling off, as I said earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty encouraged by the Sixers. I mean, I don't think a championship run will happen this year. I do think even outside of the backup center, I think a lot of the rest of the roster is not ideal. I think you can cobble together, a pretty good rotation with everybody else, but like it is a lot of guys who on a game-to-game basis have a lot of variance. Like, is Shake Milton or Furkan Korkmaz going to be good in any particular game? I have no idea. The Sixers probably have no idea.
Yep.
Danny Green has looked cooked at times. I still trust. I'm a Danny Green truther.
I think he's been great recently. I think he's
Yeah.
had like 4 or 5 games where I'm like, he
Yeah.
looks like last year's version of Danny Green.
Yeah, and like maybe that's the answer for like the 5th closing spot. Harris has, Tobias has played better recently. I mean, the thing with Tobias is just so funny because he's just so overpaid, but like he'll be fine. Like he'll play, he'll show up, he'll play hard, he'll make some threes. Like he's playable in any series basically. The fact that he's like their ideal big forward stopper is not good. It's not good at all. But again, like that's something that I think you can retool over the summer. I've been very encouraged. Like the Maxey Harden Embiid trio to me has looked really good. Harris is like the most overpaid 4th option in the NBA, but like in that role, he's been mostly pretty fine.
I thought his
It's just
defense on Giannis was pretty good, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Giannis was
Yeah.
hitting tough shots, but like if Giannis is going to hit tough shots, he's unstoppable. So
Yeah. I mean, I think he's overall played, pretty well, in the past couple weeks. So I'm mostly encouraged by the Sixers. I certainly don't think they're favorites to come out of the East, but like especially with the Robert Williams news, like the only team that seems like I would really be worried is the Bucks. Without Robert Williams, I don't know if the Celtics are like a top tier team, and then like the Heat frauds. Don't deserve any other analysis. The Nets are just a mess.
I actually just recorded a Heat slander pod, and then they went 2-0 and they beat the Celtics, although they didn't have Rob Williams. So.
Yeah, I just God, I hate them so much. But yeah, I mean the East has fallen off. Like for a lot of the years, like the East is great, and it's like the Cavs are banged up, they're not playing well. The Bulls still don't have Lonzo Ball. There was an update that he is working as he's ramping back up starting today, but like he's not going to be at 100%. They haven't played very well in months. Like I hate the Raptors too. Like they're just so weird and annoying to play against. I don't know if they have enough offense to really make a deep run, but like the East isn't that great. Like the Sixers, I think could definitely make a conference finals run depending on who they play. But like the Bucks are the team that I would not. I don't. No team in the NBA should want to play the Bucks ever.
Yeah.
And I do think that they don't have a bigger forward, which is kind of the Sixers' biggest weakness defensively. Like KD, like whose guard is it going to be? Tobias on KD? That's brutal.
He'll probably have to be Thibault, to be honest. And Thibault is like has proven to not be like the Bucks have figured out a way to just play Thibault off the court.
Yeah.
Like they've basically like like when I say they don't guard him, I'm saying they're not putting anyone, like they don't even pretend to guard him. They're literally just like, yeah, whatever. You stay over here. We'll double team Joel every time he touches it. We'll double team Harden on drives. We'll make sure that those guys can't beat us, and we'll make Matisse Thybulle hit open threes to beat us. And that's honestly not going to happen. So
yeah.
So kind of just before we like move on to the next thing, the one thing that has been brought up is, once again, I think that the Sixers, I totally agree with your analysis. I think they could make a conference finals run. I think they'd need luck matchup wise, and I think they need luck injury wise in order to make a real run towards the finals. I think like my thing about the Bucks is like, they have proven the last 2 seasons they don't give a shit about the regular season, and they can turn it on when they need to. And that is what scares me. Like to me, they are the team that most obviously has a level to go up in the playoffs. Like the Nets have been playing for 2 to 3 weeks like they have to win every game because they kind of have to. Yeah, exactly. The Celtics have been, because of the Robert Williams thing, like you could argue he's their second or third most important player, depending on like
Jaylen Brown slander.
It's not even like, I like Jaylen and he's really good, but like to me, the thing that made like their defense without Robert Williams is very good. Their defense with Robert Williams is terrifying. Elite.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they showed exactly why he's so important, not only to their defense, but to their offense last night, because they didn't have an answer for Bam on the on the other end. Like Bam was getting whatever he wanted, and like Robert Williams would make sure that did not happen. And then the second part is, because Miami kind of runs like this heavy switching system, they switch on a ton, and basically like Robert Williams being that vertical spacing threat is something that like they're just gonna like. Tice and Horford are perfectly fine, but they're not going to give you the rim protection and the vertical spacing threat that Robert Williams does that makes that offense and that defense so potent. So we'll see if he can come back. If he can come back in the second round, that's a matchup that the Sixers should try to avoid at all costs. I think I think that like I would probably put the Celtics and the Bucks healthy in their own tier just based on what they've shown us this year. And I'd probably put the Sixers and the Nets in the tier below that just because there's so many question marks around them. But because of the Robert Williams injury, that definitely changes things in the Eastern Conference. And I think that I've just seen the Celtics have injuries and then still win in the playoffs so many times that like they lost Hayward and Kyrie the one year. Like they always seem to just figure out a way to overcome injuries in a way that other teams cannot. And it's still a matchup I wouldn't want for the Sixers, especially if by the second round Robert Williams can come back. But kind of just talking about the Sixers vibes in general, like the whole Doc thing with Embiid going into the press conference and saying what he said about I should have been on the floor when Giannis was, which obviously he should have been. They should have been pairing his minutes, but they didn't do that. And then Wos from The Ringer, who he's a big fan of mine, goes on his podcast. Basically, Wos shits on the Sixers all the time, and I'm a large part of the reason because I dig up his old takes that aged poorly about like Tyrese Maxey and stuff. But Wos was being honest today, and like people were like, oh, he might just be making this up because he's a Sixers hater. I'm like, nah, I don't think he would make something like this up. He was talking about how when the Sixers were in LA recently, he ran into a Sixers player that he knows when he was out to dinner. And basically he said to them, I can't pick you guys to come out of the East this year. Like it was after the Nets game. And he was like, I just don't see it with this team. Like, you know, Harden and Embiid are really good, but like the East is tough and blah, blah, blah. And the player said to him, you know, I wouldn't pick us either. And I'm fairly certain that player was Danny Green because I have heard all season that Danny has not been happy with his rotation. Also, someone dug up that Wos had Danny on his Twitch stream not that long ago, like a year or two ago. And so I was pretty certain. But once again, going back to the Doc Rivers thing is like I know Danny has been upset with the fact that he kind of like lost minutes and stuff, but like it really does feel like in order to like go on a run to the finals, like what we just saw with the Heat, the reason why I never believed in the Heat is for on-court reasons. But once I saw Spo and Jimmy getting into it, I was like, there's no fucking way I believe in this team at all. And I feel like you have to like what the Bucks do really well is like they all get along. They're all like, you know, like they support the players and the coaches and whatever. And like, if there's a veteran locker room guy, especially someone like Danny Green, who I think it is, saying this stuff, that's not great when you're trying to forecast a playoff run.
That's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's Danny Green, I mean, Danny Green's like the only good real veteran who's still playing, like really.
Exactly.
And I mean, I would trust his opinion on a team's ability. I mean, he's won three championships, two champions. I don't. Three on three different teams. He's been around some of the best NBA players of all time. If he doesn't think this team has it, that's a very bad sign.
Yep. And also a week ago on his podcast, I was like, Danny, can you please just shut the fuck up until after the season? Like he goes on there and he says, before Robert Williams gets hurt, he said, I think the Celtics could win the East. And I'm like, what? Like, you're on a team that's playing right now. What are you doing? Like,
oh, man.
So overall, while I feel as though the Sixers could have some things break their way, I don't feel great about that aspect of it. But it also and Wos even mentioned in his comments while he said this was a lot of the times when I talk to players and they're upset with a team or a coach or whatever, it's because they're not getting enough minutes and they're not getting enough run or their role isn't bigger or whatever. And that's exactly what has happened with Danny this year. It's like, I've heard these things kind of behind the scenes. And like, ultimately, I personally think the Sixers are better with Danny Green starting than with Matisse Thybulle. And it's not that Thybulle doesn't bring something to, like, in certain matchups, you might have to start Thybulle because of the things that we talked about where like defensively, like Danny just can't hang the way that he used to, but half court offense wise, Danny Green and Maxey spacing in the corners with Harden and Embiid running pick and roll, it's kind of a pick your poison situation where the Sixers will have the shooters to make it so that their half court offense is unstoppable. And I personally think that even if it just makes him happier, like just put him in the starting lineup, just put him in the starting lineup to make him happier. Like you said, he's a veteran locker room guy. If he sucks, you can do what you do with Thibault and just pull him. And he's having a bad game. He's having an off night. To me, I think it's important to have guys who have proven that they can play in the playoffs and guys who have been part of championship cores to be there, especially when it's a veteran guy who you're trying to keep happy and isn't super washed like DeAndre Jordan and Paul Millsap.
Yeah, I would definitely start him. Thibault, his defense is insane, but yeah, the offense is a big issue against a lot of matchups. I don't know how much he can really hang on the floor deep playoff runs. It depends on the opponent, I guess. Against the Nets, you probably have to have him on there to guard Kyrie, or KD. Against the Celtics, I just don't know. It's why I think they're I just don't quite believe in them as a championship team this year unless things really break their way. Because you kind of need him, but he's also a big liability on one half the court, and those guys are really tough against the best teams in a 7-game series.
100%. They will scheme him out of your rotation. And actually, I thought Doc's comments, and Spike Eskin actually nailed this a few years ago when he was talking about Thibault, and he basically said he's kind of like the defensive version of Lou Williams, where he comes off the bench, he's an energy guy, and he'll have these big flashy plays, but also he has a lot of weaknesses in his game. And Doc actually used that analogy recently, and he said, look, when Lou Will was coming off the bench, we needed him to be a scorer playmaker, and when he was having games where he couldn't do that, we had to pull him because he just wasn't able to give us that kind of production that we needed from that spot. And that's what he's like I said, the Bucks have already figured out a way to Thibault has played, I think, between the last 2 Bucks games, I think he's played a total of 35 minutes in those 2 games because Doc realizes early he can't play him. And I think that, to me, Danny could be a bit if Danny plays we know that Danny can play, that's a big swing piece for the Sixers just because, once again, Doc might not shorten the rotations, but if he does shorten the rotations, then having 5 guys you can trust, the recent version of Tobias, we can probably trust a little bit more. So you have your 5 starters you can trust. And then it basically is just who's feeling it that night. Let's go with Shake. Let's go with Furkan. Let's go with Thibault. Let's go with Niang. You have options coming off of the bench and try to figure that out as you go and which works for each matchup, which, once again, don't have a ton of confidence in. But they at least, I feel a little bit better about the depth than I did before. And ultimately, it will probably come down to Harden or Embiid carrying us. So this is really going to be a defining season, I think, for both of their legacies. As I've said, time and time again, if there's another playoff flame out, they'll give it a little bit more time to kind of figure things out. But ultimately, those 2 guys are the ones that are going to have to carry and do a real carry job in this playoffs. But let's move on to the Clippers Jazz game the other night, which, holy shit, my God, I was watching that game, and I just want to say I feel so bad. I have a coworker. I was working that night, and my coworker in the call had a bet slip, and on his bet slip, he had Donovan Mitchell to score 25 and the Jazz to win. And when Donovan Mitchell scored 25, they were up 25 points in that game. And I was like, never trust the Jazz. You have not won yet. The Jazz are playing the Clippers. They might have PTSD from the last playoff series that they played in. I don't think the Clippers are going to take their foot off the gas because I just watched the Sixers blow a lead to the Clippers a few weeks ago, and this team just never gives up. How did that happen again? What the fuck is going on with the Jazz, and how do the Clippers just keep doing this to them in Paul George's first game back?
Yeah, I think there might be a little bit of a psychological element. I generally hesitate to call teams soft or weak or whatever. This Jazz team, they just don't have very good vibes. Maybe more than soft or weak, because I don't really know. I wouldn't necessarily label a lot of their key guys that way. I just don't think the vibes are good there. The Rudy Donovan stuff has been boiling for years and years and years, and as we've seen in Lob City, when that happens, there's at least something there. It's probably not as dramatic as they hate each other, they can't stand each other. It's just they don't get along very well. They probably kind of wish that each of them was the main guy instead of a co guy.
Sixers fans could understand that.
Yeah, exactly. It's I don't think there's like animosity there necessarily, but the vibes are just not very good there. And this is just they felt like a team for a couple months now that just knows that it's very much like Lob City. Actually, the parallels are super similar. They know that the end is coming. They know that they are not as good as the other top teams. They just don't have that talent. They don't have the depth. They've been played out. I don't see it with them, and I don't know. The Clippers game is, I think it's partially a little bit just like maybe they got in their own heads a little bit, but like it's the same issues that we saw last year, and they had a horrible offseason. Like I like Rudy Gay. I wouldn't say a favorite NBA player, but he's had like a really fun career. He's still like a useful guy, but like he's not what they needed. Hassan Whiteside is not what they needed. Like their perimeter defense is terrible. They have no plus. Like Royce O'Neal's their only plus perimeter defender. Like maybe Mike Conley, but he's undersized. And like Royce O'Neal is not a stopper. He's not a guy who can anchor like a perimeter defense. And it's just like they just can't stop guys on the perimeter. It's like it's not Rudy Gobert's fault. I think some of the stuff on offense where like he can't punish switches, that is on him. But
Yeah.
like that's not really their issue. Like their offense is mostly fine. It's like they can't play defense on the perimeter. They can't get in front of anybody. Losing Ingles, who's not like a great defender, but at least he has size. He's smart. That was a blow. They replaced him with like Nikhil Alexander Walker, who's like not in the rotation. Like I they've had some very questionable decisions the past couple, seasons. And yeah, I mean, I thought they'd be a really good regular season team, but after last postseason, I gave up on this core being anything in the playoffs, and I've seen nothing to go against that. Like, I mean, they could beat almost any team, I think, in a playoff series. Like if Donovan Mitchell's hot, like, and their threes are falling, like it can beat almost anybody. I don't think they beat the Suns, but like I think they could beat any other team in the West, maybe, in just one playoff series. But their
On
defense just
court. Like that's like you feel like on the court that makes sense. But I feel like once again we're talking
yes
about like the vibes of everything. And like the
is
vibes
bad.
like yeah, it's like
Yeah,
unless you have Kobe Shaq level talent out there, unless you have guys who are Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, like you there's a certain level that you need to
yeah,
be able to of talent you need to be able to overcome the weirdness of the whole situation.
right.
And there is like, even if it isn't like I fucking hate Donovan Mitchell or I fucking hate Rudy Gobert, there's clearly some tension there. And it was in the fucking post game comments, like, like it's the same fucking thing as last year, basically Rudy saying, we're not getting our hands dirty. Earlier this year, he said, I wish that some players on our team would focus on defense more like Devin Booker. Like the comments that are being made are just shade thrown back and forth the entire season at each other.
It's
And
beautiful.
it is funny to me because I went back and I listened to our preseason podcast, and we basically both said the same thing, which is we both think they're going to be a really good regular season team. We both had them like first or second,
Yep.
and we felt as though it was going to kind of be that same machine that it was last year. And then in the playoffs, the only way that they can make a run or like prove that they're better is through Donovan Mitchell getting better. And I think he has gotten better every
Yes,
year.
yep.
Like I actually think he's really, really good now. And I was
Yep.
always more of a Donovan Mitchell skeptic. Really until the playoffs last year was when I like started to kind of come around on the idea of him being like a real top 15 type player in the NBA. And it feels as though this team is on the verge of just completely blowing it up, because I think that like all of the stuff that we talked about with the animosity, the fact that they didn't even try to get any perimeter defenders. Like they didn't
Yeah.
even try to get a guy like you guys. And I know that Robert Covington also not a stopper, not a guy who is going to like, you can't put him on the best option on the other team and he's going to shut
Sure.
him down, but he's going to help your team defense. Like he's going to
Yeah.
be, he's going to make your defense better. He's done that on every team that he's ever played for. And he's already done that. And you guys got him basically as a throw-in in that trade.
It is pretty crazy. I don't the Robert Covington's value saga has been very, very weird, where he was like, I love Robert Covington. I have, since his days on the process Sixers, but he was definitely overvalued a few years ago.
For
Like,
sure.
absolutely. But like it was like people like in the mainstream media, like, Zach Lowe and others were like, oh, like, Robert Covington, like maybe not that good. Like teams have kind of figured him out. And it's, I didn't watch much of the Blazers this year because they were like a dumpster fire. But as soon as he got to the Clippers, it's like, this guy is not even close to washed. Like, he's really good. He's still extremely good defensively. He is like top 5 hands in the NBA. He's always getting steals and blocks. He like the point of attack was never a strong point of his, and it's not good now. Like, he's below average there, I would say. But like, he's also a solid rebounder. He will move the ball. He takes a lot of threes. He's not like a sniper, but he will take a lot of threes. Like, I just don't get it. Like, they got him for a throw, and I feel like other teams could have gotten him for like a couple second round picks, maybe like a really heavily protected first. And I guess there's just like no interest. It's very confusing to me, because after the trade, he was the Clippers' best player over the last month, like, which is saying a lot about the Clippers. But like, he was amazing on defense and still contributing on offense. And yeah, I mean, the Jazz would be much better if they had him compared to like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I mean, they made a trade with the Blazers, and
that's what I'm
traded,
saying.
yeah, it's very weird.
It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, you had the opportunity, like you said, you probably could have gotten him for Joe. You probably could have gotten Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Robert Covington for Joe Ingles and a heavily protected first round pick, like you said. Like,
definitely.
you could, like, what are you doing? Like, you could have at least give yourself a shot. Like, and also another thing, like, I feel like Robert Covington would fit in really well with that system, because they need wings. They need guys who know when to shoot and when to keep the ball moving. Their team defense could use some work. Like, they can't just rely on Rudy to be everything all the time. Like, I just don't really understand why. I don't understand why the Sixers weren't all over bringing Robert Covington.
You would make a lot of sense for the Sixers.
Dude, like, what are we doing? Like, I know that we were caught up with the whole Harden thing, and we probably weren't making any moves, but like, I would have gladly given up Danny Green and a protected first to get a better version of what Danny Green is now. Sure. Like that's kind of big. And like, I was never the biggest Covington guy. I think that in the playoffs, his weaknesses can show, but you need guys that fill that role. And once again, he would be like a fifth starter, maybe like the first man off the bench for the Sixers. And it doesn't really make any sense to me that this guy kind of went for nothing. And the Jazz and the Sixers and these teams that are kind of very desperate for two-way wings were just like, we're good. And the Clippers were just like, we already have 7 two-way wings, but we want 9.
Well, all they need to do now is trade Marcus Morris and clear some room for Covington.
Well, he's going to be a Sixer next year, so don't you worry about that. It feels like a move that will be made.
Philly would, to be fair, love Marcus Morris.
For sure. He's a Philly guy, too.
Yeah. I mean, I could actually kind of see that paying out well, as long as if they don't have Doc coaching. If they have a different coach, I could actually see Marcus Morris working there. But if it is Doc, he's going to play like 35 minutes a game, and it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. But I'm just thinking, like, we need a big wing 4 type who will just put up a ton of threes and like not really think about it. I know his defense has fallen off a little bit, but like, once again, we have George Niang. Like, it's not like our defensive options. Tobias and George aren't that great defensively. But so I just want to kind of talk a little bit more about like the teams that could potentially blow it up. So this is, as I said, kind of a ringer Bill Simmons-y situation here, where there are a handful of teams in the NBA. I came up with my 3 teams I think are most likely to blow it up this offseason. So I think the Sixers bought themselves time with the Harden trade. I think that all the teams that would be kind of prime candidates for this, and like, when I say blow it up, I mean get rid of one of your 2 best players and reconfigure the roster. I think the Sixers will blow it up we'll get rid of we'll bring in new role players, we'll move guys around, we'll figure things out. I think that there are 3 teams, of the Jazz being number 1 for me. I think if the Jazz lose in the first round of the playoffs, one of Rudy or Donovan are on a different team next year. Yeah. My guess would be it's Rudy, only because I think that the Jazz are like, we finally have a marketable star in this market. Like, we're going to hold on to him for as long as we can. And I think that Rudy, although Rudy's contract makes him a little bit hard to trade, there should be teams like, another thing Mike Chiodo brought up to me, which was like, as much as I'm a Rudy hater, like, he fits on a lot of teams because he's just like a one-man defense, especially during the regular season. His defense is crazy valuable. And then on top of that, he's just like a role threat who will fit with any star, basically, that can run pick and rolls. So they're number 1 on there. I'm mad that the Ringer brought this up on that podcast, because I had an idea for a trade, and I think a few people have had this idea. I don't think it's an original thought of mine, but it's basically my team who I have third on here most likely to blow it up, which is the Atlanta Hawks. They make a trade for Rudy Gobert because you have someone who can cover up Trey's bad defense. They want to move John Collins anyway. So you could move like John Collins, Clint Capella, and maybe someone else in picks for Rudy. And then you have the Rudy Trey combo in Atlanta. And then you can try to rebuild with more athletic, kind of a diet version of Rudy and Capella if he can ever get healthy again. And Collins, who can be kind of that 4-5 who can shoot and catch lobs and do all that stuff. So first off, what do you think? First off, I definitely think the Jazz are going to blow it up after this season, but what do you think of that kind of trade?
I mean, I like that. I mean, the Hawks would have been on my list as well. I think I can think of 3 others, so I would have 5 that are potential candidates. The Hawks would definitely be 2 or 3 for me though, because their season has been, very disappointing. And Capella's been one of the big reasons why he's still been good, but he's been way worse than he was last year when he was like an all NBA level guy, basically an all defense level guy. I think that makes sense. Like Collins and Capella, I don't know if you'd even need to throw in anything else, maybe like a pick or 2 or maybe one of their like random young guys. But yeah, I think it makes sense for both teams. I think like Collins, Capella, Mitchell would be kind of fun. And yeah, I mean, there's nobody better in the NBA to cover up Trae Young's weaknesses than Rudy Gobert. I mean, maybe like Giannis or Embiid are up there, but like any of those guys, like, so I like that a lot. And I think the Hawks are a prime candidate. Like some of their young guys have just not panned out. Like Gallinari and Lou Williams are aging. Bogdanovich has been hobbled this year. DeAndre Hunter, I was never very high on. He has not had a great season. So yeah, like I do think that they're kind of a prime candidate. I like that trade. I think it would work well for both teams.
Yeah, I think that both of those teams will probably shake it up after the season, and it just makes sense because, like, once again, when you're trying to find someone to take on Rudy Gobert's massive contract, it isn't easy to find teams that have a ton of tradable salary and players that the Jazz would actually want. And it is Danny Ainge, who Danny Ainge is now helping run things there, and he was apparently a big fan of John Collins and tried to get him on the Celtics. So, like, there's at least some connection there. It is funny that ever since Danny Ainge got there, someone pointed out the Jazz have went from like being, and a lot of it was just injuries and like, but maybe Danny Ainge is just bringing bad vibes is my point.
I hope
because
so.
because the team has not been very good. So you said you had 3 other teams you thought. I'm going to say my second team, which is I think the Miami Heat. So I think that and it's not just because I'm a Heat hater and I did this whole podcast last episode about it, but like, I think that Miami being the market that they are, having the development staff that they do, having Spo, always finding guys on the margins, that they would be like, they could trade Jimmy Butler after the season, or they could trade, like, seeing an opportunity in the trade market by saying, look, this team's going fucking nowhere. We have Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry who could contribute to contenders immediately. We're not going to be a contender, but we have Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. And then hopefully we can try to recoup some draft picks and young players to rebuild around those guys, and then maybe try to recruit a star in free agency eventually. Because I don't think there's going to be a ton of stars available this summer. Like, there isn't like a ton of obvious names to me, and they might see that opportunity as like, look, we could trade both of these guys and they could contribute to other teams, and we could maybe rebuild our team down here. And I think that if the Heat lose in the first, or they either got to lose in the first round of the Nets, or they got to get fucking destroyed by the Bucks again or something. Like they gotta prove that like the way they played against the Celtics last night, like if they play like that in the playoffs and they're competing every game, I don't think they're gonna blow it up. But I think if they just get fucking embarrassed, I think that they're like, we're done with this core. So
would be great. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Butler, I might not have said this a few weeks ago. I mean, I think it still would have made sense timeline wise, but I mean, the Butler Spo argument, something seems a little off there. Jimmy always wears out his welcome, after a few seasons, and it's right about that time in Miami. So, I mean, it is tough. I mean, I'm guessing there will certainly be teams that will be interested in Jimmy Butler. It would be interesting to see who. I think there are some teams who would be scared of taking him on because of the personality, but also because he's old and injury prone and doesn't shoot threes. And
His
like his
contract is
offense has fallen off.
massive.
Yeah, yeah. So that would be really interesting. But those are also my top three. I just have two other. One of them might not even count. But yeah.
All right, so before we get into that, I do just want to say we forgot to mention this last episode. I had Nihilist Bucks on, and we talked about what team would be crazy enough to trade for Jimmy Butler after another burnout with another team if things didn't work out. And we forgot the most obvious one of all, which is the New York Knicks.
Oh yeah.
The Knicks they have Thibs as their coach. They've been like, he would be, as much as Jimmy has his flaws and all the things we've talked about, he would be the best Knick they've had since Melo.
Easily. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that a trade where, like, I mean, I don't think that they would do, like, I don't think the Heat would want Randall, but like a trade where you're sending out Randall's contract plus picks and young players and stuff to get Jimmy there to try to like maybe recruit people, which is funny because he seems to clash with everyone everywhere he goes. But that just, there's a lot of connections there, and it does seem like a very Knicks move that they would do. So that's definitely a chance. So who are your other two teams? Because I thought of some teams, but I think we're going to have one team in common that I didn't include on this list. And the reason I didn't include them was because I don't think they're going to move one of their top two players. But who would you say are likely on that list?
I'm likely as a stretch. I mean, it would be hilarious if the Lakers traded Anthony Davis.
Yes.
I don't think it'll happen, but I think there is a scenario. I mean, this season has been a glorious, sweet disaster for the Lakers. Could have been predicted. I don't think anybody could have predicted this.
No, I went back and listened to our preseason podcast, and we both had the Lakers as our 3 seed, and we said we don't think it blows up until the playoffs. But you brought up and you said on there, the Lakers do have a chance of just sucking this year. And I was like, I feel like in the back of my brain, I feel the same thing, but I don't want to deny LeBron James.
Sure.
That was our whole thing, was like, we don't want to deny LeBron until he shows us. And he has clearly shown that he's still very good, but not good enough to carry the way that he used to. So yeah, I agree with you.
On a tangent, the Arnovitz on Low Pod where he's like, LeBron deserves a first team All NBA. I'm like, get out of here. Get out of here. I don't know if he'd make any of the All NBA teams. For me, he probably should, but like, I don't know. If he would. Maybe, like, sure. I'd put Pascal over him. What?
The forward depth with All NBA this year is not very good. So he would probably
put Pascal Siakam over him.
Then you probably wouldn't have LeBron on your, because that was the last spot we couldn't think of, was like, because we had Jimmy on the set. We had Jimmy on the third team. We had, who did we have on the, because the first team, I think it's if it comes down to it and Giannis and Jokic are included as first team, there's no way LeBron should be included on first team.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
No. And then second team, you would have Tatum. So Tatum's taking up the one forward.
He's going to be on second team with Tatum. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. But like, you could make the argument that he should be, I would still probably include him third team, but I think you could make the argument that like a Siakam type should make it over him.
Yeah. I mean, but anyway, like, yeah, I mean, they've been a disaster, and like, maybe they decide to trade Anthony Davis. I don't think they will, to be clear, but it's a possibility. All bets are off with them. I mean, and you don't know what LeBron is thinking. They probably don't know what LeBron is thinking. If they think LeBron is gone and like they don't trust Anthony Davis to be their number one option going forward, which I wouldn't, like, one, he's not that good of a player, and two, he's always injured, and three, I mean, he's getting up, like, not up there, but like he's has a few years maybe of super top tier left.
He's pushing 30 with a bunch of injuries, like.
Yeah, like, and if they know LeBron is going in the next year or two, why not try to recoup as much value for AD as you can? Maybe they don't think that value is there because he's missed so much of this year and it was kind of a down season for him. But like, teams out there would definitely still trade a lot for Anthony Davis.
Of course.
So it's possible. I wouldn't bet on it. But if they think LeBron is gone, I could see it. The other team, and I don't know if it qualifies as blowing up. I think the Wizards might finally let go of Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a free agent. I think he's too tightly tied to the organization, I think, to just leave them, but I think they could work out a sign and trade. Um, but yeah, that's the other one, and I don't know if that counts as blowing it up, but like he's been their number one guy for a few years, and like I think he could leave one way or another.
So me and Marty Taylor, Marty I have on the podcast a lot, had a theory around the Wizard stuff because the Sixers came up in being tied to Beal and
Yeah.
like as much as of course I'd take Bradley Beal on the Sixers, I still don't really love the idea of that. If
Hmm.
you're like, I mean, like, look, I'd take it. And I joked and I said, fuck it, get it. Like I have Lakers brain, like, and I was like, whatever, like just give me every star and we'll figure out the rest later. It
Sure.
hasn't blown up on them or anything, but so I've basically said like, yeah, of course, let's just fucking do it. But ultimately, what the Sixers really do need is like a power forward who can play point of attack defense and do whatever. And me and Marty had a common thought, which was like the Heat are being tied to Bradley Beal now. And if the Wizards are like, look, we want to do some sort of sign and trade and we want to rebuild, the Sixers and the Heat both can offer picks.
Hmm.
And the Sixers would be able to potentially dump Tobias Harris's contract somewhere or send it to the Wizards with young players and picks. And then the Sixers bring back Jimmy Butler. That was like where we were getting like really galaxy brain. Cause like, honestly, as much as Butler drives me insane and all of like the bullshit, whatever, he's friends with Joel Embiid. And on top of that, he would really fit a lot more on the Sixers than Bradley Beal would. So I'm just throwing that out there. Let that marinate a little bit, Sixers fans. We'll see if anything like that were to happen. But Marty and I both had the thought of just like maybe Embiid's like, let's get Jimmy back. Like I love Jimmy and like whatever. Although Harden and Butler
Jimmy
locker room. Oh my god.
Yeah, Harden Jimmy seems like a absolute disaster waiting to happen. That would be my hesitancy with
Yep.
them. Is you would have to really clear it with Harden and Butler and be like, can you guys do it? And they would both say yes, of course, and then it would be a disaster anyway. But
It's
I
so
mean,
true.
from a fit and talent perspective, I mean, Maxey, Harden, Jimmy, Embiid is, I mean, that's winning the championship if they're healthy.
Yeah, exactly. It's good enough too, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, if you count the Wizards moving Beal as blowing it up, I mean, I really think they might actually finally trade him because their team is just none of their prospects are good. Like they did trade for Porzingis, which is like they kind of want to compete, I guess, but like he's not that good. Like I don't know, but I don't know if that counts as blowing it up really.
Well, I think it does because I've thought about this and like I think the Nets could have done this if they took Harden to the offseason. I think the Wizards could do it with Beal where like you could see a circumstance where it's the first time we've seen if Bradley Beal says, look, I want to go to Miami, I want to go to Philly, I want to go to one of these places, Boston, like he includes a list of places. It could be a competitive sign and trade for the first time ever. Like, because no teams have cap space. So it could get to the point where he can dictate where he wants to go. But if he gives them a few teams, then those teams can compete. And Washington might be able to get back an actual return for him instead of just like getting a Precious Achua, Goran Dragic type return like the Raptors got for Kyle Lowry. So I do think that like I think all of these things are long shots, but I think that of the ones that we mentioned, the Jazz and the Hawks and the Heat seem like the most like likely after this season. But I would love to see the other ones, especially because like just especially with Washington, like just give your team some direction. Like Bradley Beal's not going to turn down that extension because he's going to get paid the most money ever. And he's like the 29th, the 30th best player in the NBA. Like, of course he's going to do it. Like he's not that level of guy and he should take the money, but it would be funny just to see a little bit of craziness this offseason with that. But all right, let's talk a little bit about let's just talk about your Western Conference contender tiers. Because last episode I talked about my Eastern Conference ones. This was before Robert Williams got hurt. So I would probably move the Celtics down a tier. I think Milwaukee's in their own tier in the East now. I think that I would have the Sixers, Celtics, and Nets in the second tier. And then from there, I don't really care. I don't think any team has a realistic shot to win the Eastern Conference. The West is a little bit different. Or I should say it is similar to the East in that I think there's one clear favorite.
Yes.
But I don't know what other teams really have a shot at winning the West because there's just a bunch of craziness after the number 1 seed Suns. So what would be your contender tiers? Like, who would you say is the favorite? Who would you say is like has a shot? And like, who needs a bunch of shit to break the right way in order to win the West?
I mean, I think tier 1 has to be the Suns. I mean, I'm a huge Giannis respecter and a Bucks respecter in general. The Suns should be the favorite to win it all. Like
I agree.
They are 62-14. They have actually not had great injury luck. They've missed a lot of their key guys a lot of the season. Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Cam Johnson have all missed time. I think the only one of their top guys who's played like most of the season is Mikal Bridges. But like all of these guys are having amazing seasons. Their depth campaign has fallen off a little bit, but like they're getting good minutes out of like JaVale McGee and Bismack Biyombo. Landry Shamet's having a solid season. Like they have enough like playable depth with like, Torrey Craig can play a few minutes. Like
Cam Johnson.
Jay Crowder is still good. Like they're just really good. Devin Booker's taken a step up, which is huge for them. But like, yeah, I think they're the favorites to win it all. And certainly the Western Conference. Tier 2, I would say, is the Grizzlies and Warriors. I'm tempted to put the Mavericks in there. I just don't know with them. They're such a weird team and they're having such a weird season. Like they made this trade to get Spencer Dinwiddie, who's absolutely terrible in Washington. All of a sudden he's good for them.
Yeah.
But they still don't really have a second guy. Like I don't really trust a lot of their guys still. I mean, Luka's just so terrifying. The Clippers have played him twice in playoff series. It's just, he's so good. It's unbelievable. But I still don't really. Jason Kidd has been a good coach for them this year. I still don't know if I trust him in like playoff situations, like tactically when push comes to shove. So I don't know if I can quite get there. And the Warriors are just a huge wild card because it all depends on when Steph Curry comes back. And if he comes back and he's like ready for the second round of the playoffs, and he's like 100% or close to it, like I mean, they could win the whole thing. Like they could beat the Suns certainly. I don't know if I'd pick them. But
they're the one team I think that could beat the Suns.
Yeah. The Grizzlies, I don't think are quite there yet in terms of being able to knock off the Suns. So the Warriors are maybe they're also in their own tier, honestly. And it's like the Suns are in their own, then the Warriors are in their own, then the Grizzlies are in their own.
See, I could see the Grizzlies beating the Warriors, but I don't think I could see them beating the Suns. Like,
yes, they could absolutely beat the Warriors. Yeah. They could definitely beat the Warriors. Yeah. The Warriors are like cold and slow, and
yeah,
the Grizzlies,
exactly.
Yeah,
and the Grizzlies are kind of on a come up, similar to what the Warriors were years ago, which is the comparison everyone's been making all year. Yeah, but it does feel like it's definitely the Suns' conference to win in a way that I haven't seen in. Like, I was a Suns doubter last year. You were much higher on the Suns going into the playoffs. I remember you were like, yeah, I actually think that they have a chance to win the West. And they had some things break their way, obviously. Sure. Kawhi gets hurt, like the Lakers had injuries, all this stuff. But at the same time, they won the West. They took every game of the finals, as we talked about last week, every game of the finals was close except for one game that could have they could have won the finals last year.
Oh, easily.
Better.
Yeah.
I think they're better this year, and I think they're even being under. Like, to me, they're the team that everyone talked about with the Jazz. Like, every year the Jazz were like amazing world beaters in the regular season, especially last year when they were comparing them to the 14 Spurs and all that stuff. That's what the Suns are, is that the Suns are, they have, like, they might not have one top 10 guy, but they have two top 15-ish guys, and they have it depends on where you have Bridges and Nathan, but like you could argue they're both top 40-ish. Yeah. And like you have four top 40 guys, crazy depth. Monty Williams has done a great job coaching this year. The thing with them is they don't lose in the clutch. Like they are incredible. Dude, I think I saw something the other day that said they were like 39-0 when going into the fourth quarter with a lead or something. Like, they're crazy when they have a lead. Like they are the anti-Sixers Jazz. Like they don't blow leads ever. And I think that like they've just been a fucking machine. Like I would be pretty surprised. Injury obviously being the exception, that if they didn't win the West, I think that the
Yes.
Warriors have the one shot to beat them. I think that the Grizzlies have the shot to beat the Warriors, but they can't beat the Suns. So I agree with your tiers there. The third tier is probably where I would put the Mavericks, the Nuggets, depending on if they can get back Jamal Murray, and the Jazz, who just have a ton of question marks and are just like whatever. And then from there, I don't think that any team has even those teams would have to have some crazy injury stuff. They'd have to have some stuff break their way. I think that it's like we're probably on a collision for a rematch of the finals from last year. But I
agree.
I think the Suns would beat the Bucks this time. And I know that Nihilist Bucks didn't want to hear that last week, which is why I didn't want to hurt his feelings. But like, I really do think that the Suns are a fucking machine this year, and that they have figured out some of their major weakness in that series was not having a backup center once Dario Saric went down. Like, I don't even know if he would have been playable as a backup center in that series. And now you have JaVale McGee and Bismack Biyombo, who are not particularly good, but they're effective in their roles. And then on top of that, you have the fact that like they're not Frank Kaminsky, and Frank Kaminsky was fucking terrible last year.
He was
in the
god awful. Yeah,
there's no way he should ever be in a finals rotation. So yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that ultimately that probably will be what happens. I think watching the Suns when they had nothing to play for against the Sixers, and they were still just like fucking like they came all the way back and beat us. I was like, this team is going to be a fucking problem.
Yeah, but they're really, really good.
They're crazy.
The stuff that I've heard from the Nuggets is not super positive on Jamal Murray and Michael Porter. I mean, Porter had a setback, but Murray, it seems very murky. Like there were a couple reports a few weeks ago that like he was progressing, and now it doesn't seem like he is. I don't really know what's going on with them, but I would be the same as I would for the Clippers, even if Kawhi Leonard came back, where it's like he's been out the entire season. Is he going to come in and play like P. Kawhi Leonard? No. If anybody would, it might be Kawhi Leonard.
Of course,
but like
him and KD are like just they're different. They're different.
Yeah, they're freaky, but like, I mean, Jamal Murray is just not on that level. Like Jamal Murray is very, very good, and he would help the Nuggets a lot. But like their problem is not guard play either. Like Monty Morris has probably been their second or third best player this year. He's the best backup. He would immediately be the best backup point guard in the NBA if Jamal Murray came back. And like Bones Highland, as we all know, knows ball and is a real hooper. And
that's right.
And is the Clippers could have drafted him and didn't, which pains me. But
he went 2 spots before the Sixers, but it's all right.
Yeah. So like guard play is not really their issue either. Like, I mean, they could use that top tier upside that like Jamal Murray brings in terms of being like a really excellent scorer and playmaker, but like I don't know if that like their problem is also perimeter defense, and like they don't have guys on the wing who are really, I mean, Aaron Gordon's good, but like he's not like a perimeter, he's more of a forward guy. Like they have to play like Austin Rivers a lot because their perimeter defense isn't good. Like I love my guy, but he's not a guy you want playing like 20-25 minutes in playoff series. I just don't think it's the Nuggets season. Next season, I think they'll be terrifying. Like they are going to be really, really good, especially if they reload their bench a little bit. But yeah, I would agree. Like the Mavs are the team that I can't quite place because I actually think they could possibly beat the Warriors. Like if Luka's on one, they could beat almost anybody. I don't think they could beat the Suns, and I don't think they could beat the Bucks. But like I think they could beat any other team in the NBA in a 7-game series because like Luka is that unstoppable. They do have better defenders around him now. Brunson and Dinwiddie do add more ball handling than they've had in years prior. They got rid of Porzingis, who's just holding them back in terms of style of play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're not realistic chances to win the West. And they're not beating the Suns. Like they do not.
The one matchup I do want to see is the Nuggets and Mavs in the first round, because I just want to see the one-man wrecking crew teams of like Jokic versus Luka. Like I think the Mavs probably have a little bit more talent around. And although the Nuggets have come on recently, I mean, the one thing I will say is if they bring back, the only thing about bringing back Jamal Murray is that it means less on-ball opportunities for Will Barton and Aaron Gordon, which is good in my opinion.
Yes,
like I think that like their offense will be even better if Jamal comes back. And I think that those two being able to focus more on defense and trying to be like, I know Barton's inconsistent and Gordon's actually a pretty good defender, but like I think that those guys slotted down one in the pecking order is best for their games for sure. And especially with Bones coming off the bench, like they got a little bit of firepower. I definitely overshot when I said I thought they would make the finals in the preseason just because I didn't like the Suns that much. But the Suns have blown away my expectations, and I don't think.
I mean,
that
Importer Jr.'s missed the entire season, and
yeah, that was the thing.
Back.
And I thought Jamal would be back by like next month, and that they would just throw him in and be a fucking wrecking crew, like you said. Like they would just be like a machine, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to be that way. So let's follow up on some of our preseason award predictions because first off, we both got a few things pretty close to like the reality of what happened. So do you remember who your preseason MVP pick was when you came
I
on?
believe I went on a huge anti-Warriors Lakers media chant, and I thought that they would have to give it to LeBron or Steph because Giannis won 2 years in a row, Jokic won. These are non-glamour markets. These are non-American Hooper type whatever. I thought that media would be sure to gift it to one of those guys. And at various points this season, it seems like it would. Or KD.
They tried.
They sure tried, but it's not going to happen. So I was wrong there. But if they were healthy, they would have gotten some consideration. But I think it was one of those guys. I think.
Yeah. So you had Steph as your picks here were actually really good. You had Steph as your like choice overall, and it was you kind of defined it when we talked on that podcast, which is basically the Warriors media machine, the propaganda outlets kind of pushing.
And instead
that.
It got Andrew Wiggins an All-Star berth, which is it is still not talked enough how batshit insane that is.
Insane.
He's not. I'm still not sure he's even good. Like what happened? It's legitimately unbelievable. Like I'm on a long bit on Twitter that Amir Coffey is better than Andrew Wiggins, and I like mostly believe it. I think the Clippers would probably not be much better with Andrew Wiggins in place of Amir Coffey. And like Amir Coffey is good, but like I don't know.
I feel pretty good because I had people coming at my neck about Andrew Wiggins for a little bit, and I feel pretty good about my thing that he is a Steph and Draymond merchant because how the hell has he looked without when one of those two is out, he is not nearly as effective.
No.
And I feel I'm legit the worst all-star starter of my life. I mean, I can't imagine other than the legacy guys that might have just got it because it was like their last year in the NBA. Sure. Like Allen Iverson probably sucked his last year. I can't even really remember all that much.
He did.
And I'm sure he got it, but like still like other than like that, Wiggins is, and that is like they earned their shit throughout their career. Like Wiggins, a joke that he was to make the All-Star team is one thing. Like I thought, I said last year, and I stand by this opinion, Tobias Harris was better than Andrew Wiggins. Tobias Harris last year was better than Andrew Wiggins this year, and he didn't even make the All-Star team.
Easily. Not even close.
Yeah,
not even close.
And Wiggins was an All-Star starter. He was one of the 5 guys picked to start. It's a joke. So whatever that K-pop band out there was, they were on some fucking some bullshit there. But so you had Steph as your MVP pick.
Yeah.
Jason Tatum was your long shot, which proved to be pretty fucking good. He's probably going to finish top 5. I think he'll probably be 5th, is my guess. And so great picks by you. I had Giannis as my MVP. I think he's going to finish 3rd, so not a bad pick. And I had as my long shot, I picked the wrong bull. I had Zach LaVine as my long shot. DeMar DeRozan is the one who's probably going to finish like 6th or 7th in MVP voting. Yeah. I think that I probably should. I could have never seen DeMar DeRozan being as good as he was. I thought LaVine was clearly going to be the best player on their team and that they were going to be surprisingly good. So I had him on there, but obviously none of us got that one right because it's probably going to end up being Jokic and maybe Embiid. So
Giannis, I don't know. The Giannis, the Sixers game could be a turning point. If he has a really dynamite last couple weeks, he might still steal it. He probably won't though.
I just want to say, though, this is bullshit that the Giannis is now going to get. Giannis should be in the conversation, and I'd be fine with him winning MVP. Don't get me wrong. He's probably the best player in the NBA right now.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about from a narrative basis, Embiid just did what Giannis did 3 weeks ago without James Harden, went into Milwaukee, beat the Bucks by 3 on their home court, scored 42 points, played better defense than he's played for the majority of the season. And now it's because it's 3 weeks later and we're closer to the end. It's just going to be recency bias stuff.
That was
it's
an
that
insane
kind of
game
stuff.
by Embiid.
What's that?
That was an insane game by Embiid.
Right. And and that was after the trade. Harden was on the bench, so we didn't even have like Seth Curry and Andre Drummond to back him up. I just want to say that, like, from a narrative perspective, this is what drives me crazy about the MVP stuff, which is like all this like head-to-head stuff with like Jokic and Embiid, when I thought that Embiid arguably outplayed Jokic, but Jokic's team won because they went on a run because he was coming off the bench. Like, all this narrative stuff drives me crazy. I'm fine with any of them winning MVP.
Yes.
But I just think that some of the narrative stuff should just kind of go out the window. Okay. Let's talk about most improved player, which we both had the same exact choices for ours, weirdly enough.
It was Jordan Poole, right?
We both had Jordan Poole for ours. You're a guy from Michigan. We kind of both chalked it up to he's going to be really good. He's going to get buckets. And also he plays for the Warriors, and the Warriors media machine is going to, prop out that propaganda. And then our long shot, we both chose Terrence Mann, who I haven't really paid attention to him that much, but I'm assuming he's not in the candidate pool this year for most improved player for sure.
No. Clippers fans were really disappointed with him early in the season. I was totally fine with him. He's been much better of late, but yeah, I mean, he's not going most improved. Jordan Poole probably won't. He might finish top 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly might. He'd be really up there. I mean, it's like him, Maxey, Ja, Bane.
Yeah, I think Ja will probably win.
Ja probably will win, which is totally it's totally deserving. But I mean, 100%. Poole will get votes.
Yeah. I think that Ja has made the leap that, like, Luka should have won his second year. He should have. He made the leap from borderline all-star player to top 15 guy in the NBA. Yeah. And like, that is the hardest thing to do. And that is what Ja has done this year. So I personally think that Ja Morant should get it. I would love to see Maxey get it, but I don't think they're going to give it to a second year player. They generally don't. It's probably going to come down to Darius Garland, DeJounte Murray, and Ja Morant for the most improved player award. I think Ja will probably win. Yeah. Garland might come in second. Those guys we did not mention in the preseason podcast, so they kind of had surprising. Although Garland was a guy that was being thrown around at the beginning of the season, I think DeJounte Murray's leap was really what was the most surprising there.
Yeah.
I kind of think DeJounte Murray's still a little overrated, but that's just me. Okay, so Rookie of the Year is up next. We both came close here. I think mine's going to win. So first off, I'm mad at myself for not putting money on any of this, because I at least might have been able to get a cash out bet on some of these where, like, it was looking like at a certain point of the season that these guys might win these awards. Mm-hmm. But my Rookie of the Year was Evan Mobley, who I think will win the award. And I had my long shot as Davion Mitchell and Bones Highland were my two. Bones is coming on at the end of the season. Mitchell's coming on at the end of the season. Your choice was Cade, and Cade kind of had a bad start because of his injury, and he might not really get a fair shot at the end because that first month was so brutal. But he's definitely going to finish in the top 3 or 4. And Scotty Barnes was someone we mentioned, but we mentioned him only because we thought that the Raptors were the only team that had a shot to be good enough for him to be in the conversation. I think that he's exceeded all of my expectations for what he would do as a rookie, and he's way better than I thought he ever would be. And I think Mobley probably wins this award. You had Cade as your pick, and your long shot was Chris Duarte from the Pacers.
Honestly, it didn't look bad for a couple months. And
no, he was really good to start.
Yeah, and the Pacers have just completely tanked and given up. But yeah, I mean, Bones and Davion should make all rookie teams, I would guess. At least one of them will. One of them will probably make it and not the other, because I think they're probably fighting for the same spot. But yeah, my guess is Cade will finish third. It'll be Scotty or Mobley in some order, and then Cade third. Though, I mean, I kind of think my guy Franz Wagner should be in there.
True.
His numbers are not that much worse than Scotty's. I think the highs are probably not as high, but like, I mean, he just plays for the Magic, and literally nobody cares about the Magic. But yeah, I mean, that's probably one of our better ones. I think I still think Mobley should win it. I think he's been more impressive to me than
Yep.
Scotty Barnes, in kind of a tougher situation, and with a bigger role. But I think God, Scotty being good and also likable is just so unfortunate because it just means Raptors fans being smug, and it's
I
the worst
know.
thing in the world.
I know. I literally was just about to say the one thing about Franz and Mobley that they don't have going for them is they don't have a nation of psychos tweeting about them 24/7.
It is so
and
true.
how great they are and how they should win every. I joked last week that they're going to be arguing that Scotty should be a third team All NBA as well, in addition to Pascal Siakam. But
I'm surprised we haven't seen that, to be honest. I'm legitimately
I'm
surprised.
sure you could find it. I'm sure if you dug hard enough, there's some psycho who lives in like fucking, I don't know, Alberta or something that has tweeted something along those lines. So we both agreed, by the way, I just want to say we nailed this. We both agreed Mobley was going to be the best player of this class, and I think that
He will be.
He will be. I think it's
Yes.
pretty obvious. I think that was historically good defensively for a rookie, and his offense is still pretty good too. So
yeah, I love him.
Yeah, so he's great. And then our defensive player of the year awards, honestly, I think we picked the guys that are going to be the only guy that we didn't mention in this conversation was Marcus Smart, who has a shot at winning and could. I think I even saw in a few books he was the betting favorite to win.
I think he might win.
Yeah,
I think
he would be the first guard to win since Gary Payton
Gary
in the
Payton.
90s. Yeah, he's been really fucking good this year. He's
Yeah.
doing as Mike Bradley on Twitter pointed out, he's doing the Ben Simmons playbook from last year, talking about Rudy and saying he can't guard all 5 positions.
I love it so much.
Everyone just hates Rudy, dude. Like collectively.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I would love to read like a really in-depth piece about it because nobody likes or respects Rudy Gobert, and it's like he's gonna be a first ballot Hall of Famer, like no
100%.
questions asked. One of the best defensive players of his generation. Just nobody respects him at all. It's absolutely wild.
It's insane, dude.
Yeah,
Him and
but
Trey
I think
would be a
Giannis
more
and,
hated duo than Harden and Embiid.
yeah. We had Giannis and then Rudy probably for defensive player of the year,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So I had Gobert as my choice with Thibault as my dark horse. Thibault's just never going to be able to stay on the court offensively enough to be a contender for this award. And I think that his defense, even in some regards, when he's going up against star perimeter players, he gets burnt far too often to even be like on the Kawhi level of like mention, or even like Ben Simmons.
He's just a little undersized. Yeah.
It's and his like reaction speed isn't great. Like he recovers. Like that's his game. He recovers and gets steals and blocks and jumps in passing lanes and does all that stuff. And he's still an incredibly talented defender, but like I think he tops out as like a second team all defense guy just because the offense is never going to be good enough for him to be up for this kind of award. And you had Giannis as your pick and your dark horse was Clint Capella. So
that looks bad.
He had the Achilles injury. He wasn't the same all year. The Atlanta, we both expected Atlanta to be a lot better than they were this year. I had them as a top 3 or 4 seed in the East, and they're like the 10 seed right now. So, but I think Giannis or Gobert, if Smart doesn't win it, it's going to be Giannis or Gobert, and I would guess it's Giannis. So I think you might have got that one.
I really do think Smart is going to win it. I think the Celtics narrative over the past couple months, it might be recency bias. I mean, he is an insane defender. And like he both does like all the glamour stuff and all the little stuff, which you don't often see from like those types of perimeter defenders. I think he's a perfectly deserving winner. I mean, I don't think he probably has the impact of Gobert or Giannis just due to position, but like I think I don't think Rudy is going to win it. Just because of voter bias, but that might be the top 3. It probably will be the top 3 actually.
Yeah, so we were pretty close on that, except for we missed on Smart, who's going to be the one that probably wins the award. Right now, we both at the time we had both said if Draymond stayed healthy and the Warriors were good, that he would win, and I actually think that would have been the case. Like I think
100%, yes, yeah.
If Draymond stays healthy, they had the number 1 defense by far when he was on the court. And the other guy we mentioned that would be in this conversation who also should finish probably top 5 is Bam Adebayo. Because when Bam is on the court, the Heat's defense is really fucking good. And he's switchable 1 through 5. He's a pretty good rim protector. Like he does a lot of things on the defensive end, but I still hate him because he plays for the Heat. So can't give him any respect.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Heat, we both had Tyler Hero to win 6th man of the year.
Really? I can't even remember. That's the one I could not remember. God, I hate that.
So we're right. I think he's going to win, right?
He
like
is.
who else is even a candidate? Like I can't even think of anyone who would be even close to his, like he's by far the 6th man of the year,
Has
right?
Poole started too much? He probably has, right?
I think he started a good chunk of the year when Clay was out.
Yeah. Poole is definitely, he's definitely started way too much. And now he's starting with Curry out. Yeah. I have no idea who the other 6th man candidates would be.
Yeah, like Clarkson wasn't as good this year. Like the
No.
normal guys, Luell is
Old.
gone. He's not in the conversation anymore. Like I can't even.
Yeah, it's gonna be Hero.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
Yeah.
So we had that, and once again, the thing we talked about that's really hard with the defense or with the 6th man of the year award is if you're good enough, you're just going to start too much, and that's and if there are injuries and stuff like that, and that's probably what killed Jordan Poole's case. So we had that. Our dark horses were way off, way off.
I think I said Lou Williams just for nostalgia's sake, right?
You did. You said Lou Williams and Kevin Herter from the Hawks. We each had Hawks. I had Gallo as mine as a long shot, which in retrospect looks terrible, and Kobe White from the Bulls because I thought that the Bulls were going to be good once again, and I thought that Kobe would be ideal in that 6-man type role. Hasn't turned out that way. Although he's an NBA player now, at least like he's a rotation player in the NBA,
fine.
which like. He's fine, but like I expected him to kind of thrive in that 6-man role, and he hasn't really. And he once again before this year he was pretty bad, so at least he's a rotation level NBA player now. And then our last picks, which is the coach of the year, which is just kind of random. So I just want to say, if we had both collectively decided to put money on this, we would have won 6th man of the year. I probably would have won Rookie of the Year, and you would have at least got to the point where Giannis has a shot at Defensive Player of the Year. Steph had a shot at MVP. There could have been a cash out at some point for some of these awards, is my point, that we would have probably went home with some money if we had put down some of this stuff. So the last one is the Coach of the Year. I was so far off, it's a fucking joke. I had Nate McMillan of the Atlanta Hawks because I thought the Hawks were going to be really good. I thought they were going to keep up the momentum from last year. And then my dark horse, which was just more of a joke, was Jason Kidd. And he's actually
He will get votes.
Yeah, he will definitely finish top 5 in Coach of the Year voting. And as Nihilus Buck said, the first year of the Jason Kidd experience is awesome. And then everything goes to shit in the second year. So have fun with that, Mavs. And then your picks, you had one that was really close and one that was really off. So your one that was really off was Chauncey Billups. And that shit from the jump was terrible. And by the way, I just want to point out, we both pointed out that Jason Kidd and Chauncey Billups are terrible people who should not have NBA coaching jobs. But from just like from an award standpoint, you had Chauncey, and your good pick was Udoka. So you had Ime Udoka, I think is how you say his name. And you had Udoka because you were like, the first year guys are generally the ones that win this award. And at the beginning of the year, I was like, oh, that pick does not look good at all. But holy shit, it has worked out. Like if it weren't for Monty Williams and the Suns, like being historically good this year, he probably wins the award.
Yeah, I bet he probably finished second. But yeah, I mean, the easy pick probably, I don't know why neither of us picked Monty. I guess maybe we just thought the Suns might be about as good, in which case they wouldn't win it. But yeah, I mean, I was I was high on the Suns. I thought that, a lot of
we mentioned Monty. We both said that basically. What we said was like they'd have to really exceed expectations in order to get win for him to win, because he didn't win last year when they were really good. So
I mean, they might win 7. They have a shot to win 70. Wait,
no, 68 is
68. That's still insane. Yeah, he's gonna win. Udoka might finish. Jason Kidd honestly might finish third. I don't know who else would really get votes, and people love to talk themselves into former players, but Billups. Wow. I mean, I don't think I even thought he'd be good. I didn't think he'd be good. I just thought he would get it just because people liked him.
Yeah.
and that I thought the Blazers would be at least solid, and they have gloriously collapsed. There have been so many the Blazers being terrible, the Lakers being terrible.
It's
These are all
amazing.
great storylines.
We love it. But your guy Ty Lue will definitely finish top 5.
He might. He probably will finish top 5. I think he'll be behind those. He'll be behind Udoka and Kidd though. But I mean, he'll probably be like 4th or 5th. Pretty deservedly so. I mean, he might be the best coach in the NBA. I would probably lean Spo. But I mean, Ty Lue is very, 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 very good.
I think he's at worst 2nd or 3rd. Like I think that him, Nurse, and Spo are clearly the best.
Yeah, I mean
Monty Williams too. Monty Williams, I would put up.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing with Ty Lue is he's very opposite of Doc Rivers in some ways. There are a lot of like rotational stuff. I mean, I disagree with Doc on rotations too, but there's a lot of rotation stuff that I disagree with Ty Lue about. Like he doesn't play Robert Covington enough. He plays Marcus Morris too much. He does some other random stuff. But like he nails all of the big picture things and he nails like the vibe stuff.
Yep.
And that's really the most important thing for a coach, to be honest. And he has that like 1,000,000%. He might be the best in the NBA at it. In terms of like getting guys to buy in and having guys like really have his back. And I mean, he like everybody in the NBA respects Ty Lue.
So 2 things about Ty Lue. One is that what you said, he's perfect in terms of the opposite of Doc, not only with the vibe stuff, but also when you go into a playoff series with Ty Lue as your coach, you know that he's going to try some crazy shit in game 1.
Yes.
He's going to throw some shit at the wall. He's going to see what sticks. He might even punt game 1 and just see what the vibes are. But by game 2 or game 3, he's going to make adjustments. He's going to figure that shit out on the fly in a way that Doc is like the complete opposite in that like he would rather lose doing what he does than win.
Yes.
That's just like really what it comes down to with Doc.
Yes.
And the other thing with Ty Lue is Sixers fans are really mad at him right now, but his own on Daryl Morey was really fucking funny. So
it's funny.
So Ty says like, and if the context of his quotes actually weren't even that bad. He was like,
no, not at all.
He was like, you just got to make sure Embiid and Harden can't get to the free throw line because they're both not like incredibly effective scorers if you eliminate that part of their game. And everyone took it as like them talking shit. And of course that motivated Embiid to come out and fucking drop and walk up to him and be like, I can't score without getting free throws, huh? Like talking shit. Like I didn't have a problem with it, but the more he tweeting about it and then Ty Lue saying, the last time he tweeted it cost the NBA $1 billion. It was a good own. He's very funny.
A good own.
Yeah.
Ty Lue is very funny. It was I wouldn't say I was skeptical because I mean I thought he was underappreciated in Cleveland and like everything I'd heard was that he's just a very, very, very well respected guy. But yeah, I did not think he would be this good. I mean, it's also possible he's just gotten better. A lot of coaches get better on their second stops. He's had consistently really good lead assistant coaches. Like Kenny Atkinson was there for a couple years, or last year, I guess. And Dan Craig, who used to be with the Heat as Spo's lead assistant, is there now. And they just have a really, really good staff. But yeah, I mean, he's great. And like, again, like I disagree with him. Like I disagreed with him in the playoffs a lot, but he was just figuring stuff out and like it cost the team some games sometimes, but he comes through. So, it is not going to be the Clippers year this year unless some really weird stuff happens. And like Kawhi Leonard comes back at 100%. But, I mean, the Clippers have their coach, which is, as we all know, is a big thing.
Yeah, I would say so, especially when you have the talent that they do, and now you guys have the depth that you do. And the last thing I just want to say about Ty Lue before we get out of here is when Jared Dudley wrote that book, and he said, he read the quote about, I don't even remember what the quote was about. Oh, it was about like how the Lakers didn't take the Clippers seriously, and they were like, and then Ty Lue was just like, wait, stop. Jared Dudley wrote a book? Who the fuck cares? I was like, you're Ty Lue. I know you've beefed with the Sixers a little bit. Forever goated in my mind for making fun of Jared Dudley in that way. I love it. I love it so much. It was amazing.
Jared Dudley is reviled in Clippers land for actually reasons that are not his fault. It's a classic Doc situation. Actually, he hates Doc Rivers, which is why he was making fun of the. That's why he was saying they didn't respect the Clippers is because of Doc. He is mad beef with Doc, but it's like a whole thing about how they mismanaged his injury. it's classic Clippers, Doc Rivers stuff. But that dunking on Jared Dudley is fantastic.
Jared Dudley, the worst person you know, makes a great point. Hating Doc Rivers. All right, Rob, this was a great podcast. I appreciate you coming back on. I will put all of your links in the description so people can follow you on Twitter and follow all of your work.
Thanks.
Peace,
Sounds
bud.
good. As always, great having me on.
See, that was great.